Hi, Adama. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me on again.
So we've been talking for quite a few minutes, and I wanted to just jump right in and ask you this question. Um, we were just talking about manifestation and asking for your worth and, not accepting things that are lower than what you believe your worth is. And we just talk like you're an astrologer and you're psychic and you know like the energies that are available to us. And you just said that last year to the end of last year, a lot of people were dealing with like scarcity and lack, and you said February, March. Knowing that, but then you're still human, like how do you keep up the faith that what you know intuitively is to trust that?
So I'll give like a practical approach to this. And I actually have a course on my community about this. I call it my shadow work program. But basically, I take every day of my day as a spiritual practice to be present. So anytime my mind raced about like, oh my God, money, oh my God, this, that, oh, I'm so busy, oh, my book, I'm stressed. I would bring myself back to the present and just I'd be like, oh, I'm triggered. Let's come back. Let's come back. And I think sometimes everyone gets so wrapped up in their day to day that they forget to take those moments. Meditation helps with this, but to practically change the thought.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, it's just so practical with manifestation. It's like if you're down a lane of um lack, it's feeling it, allowing yourself to feel it. Take 10 minutes. I call these like trigger moments where I will like allow myself to just I'm a Scorpio, so the internal trigger will be like rage, and then allow it to dissipate and then change the thought. Oh yeah, Venus is going into this and this, Pluto's going into this. Everything is I'm always provided for. The universe always provides for me. I am abundant. I don't have to worry. Why am I worrying? And I will just switch it and then I will just go about my day. So that physical moment of switching it really helps. And then also it is the actions that you take. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't realize that the things you say yes to, the actions you take throughout your day, the dates you go on, the people that you entertain in your reality, this can also be friendships. You are saying yes to old, crusty realities when you entertain things that you don't really want anymore.
Yeah.
It's like you're repeating the pattern. You're like in your old energy versus breaking out of those loops. So a really practical example is, say you're out to dinner with some friends and you're all racking up the bill, right? Racking up the bill. Some people might get more than others. You might get a bottle of something. So and so gets whatever. Then at the end of the meal, the check comes. Everyone's like, let's split it, whatever. And in your head, you're like, well, I only got the salad and I only got this. I shouldn't have to pay for all of this. That's a moment to take that 5-10 minutes, Adama's rage trigger moment, and allow that energy to just course through you. Be like, okay. And then ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Isn't money an infinite resource? Money's always coming, flowing to me. These are my friends. Split the bill. So that act, instead of now I've got to argue, now I've got to talk to so and so, now I've got to prove that I only deserve to pay $20 instead of 50. That act is transforming your frequency in that moment. So you are feeling that lack, you're feeling it come up. And then instead of just allowing that trigger to run the show, you are actively changing your behavior, which then actively changes your frequency. And then also says to your spirit guides, the universe, that I am actually abundant. And then you'll find out 3 days later when $50 Zelle comes into your account, $500 Zelle comes into your account, $2,000 Zelle comes into your account because you did those active things. And that's like a small example, but you can do it for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like a really practical way that I coach my clients. Just use your day as a spiritual practice. Every trigger that comes up, face it and be like, why am I triggered? Why is this triggering lack within me? Why is this stressing me out to pay $30 more or X amount of dollars for something. And if you start small too, it's not like go out and buy like a Benz or whatever, tomorrow, if you don't have the means to, but it's the small things that you can start with. And that just builds on it to the point where you manifested 100K in a year and you're like, you know what? I want to lease a Benz. That's how you then get that bigger stuff, because you worked on those triggers, you're ridding your body, you're cleansing your energetic field, so that you can actually create pathways for those that finance to come in to actually pay for those things that you want. So it's more, manifestation to me is more an energetic game. I think this is like my Cancer, Scorpio in my chart. It's about feeling it, because a lot of these triggers, the source of them they could be from past life, maybe from your ancestry. I grew up with a single mother, and literally every conversation was about money and lack and stress, like growing up. So that was embedded in my system. So I spent a good number of my 20s, early 30s, really getting that shit out so that I can really step into my true self, my higher self, which is an abundant be.
I love that. There actually was a recent New York Times article about sharing the bill, like splitting it equally when some people order less than others. So I'm like, it's so interesting that you brought that example up. So I
What
love,
did they say?
well, like that very phenomenon of what you said, like when people go out to dinner and you split the bill, and there's some people that get really angry because they only ordered a side salad because they don't have as much money. And this is also an episode of Friends, right? I don't know if you watched Friends, when
I did, yeah.
half of the group were like struggling actors and waitresses and artists, and the other half, I think it was Ross, Chandler, and Monica, made more money, and they would order all this food, and the other half couldn't afford it, and they thought it was unfair. But so I think that phenomenon is really interesting. And I love what you said about like clearing away your energy body, and through repetition, that's when you create new neural pathways, and that's how you create change. And I selfishly, or not selfishly, but I knew you were the person that I wanted to ask about this advice, because I knew the answer you would give me. But I was asked to do an event to read tarot and to read astrology charts for people. And it was this big event in New York City, and they asked me for my rate. And I was like, I'm going to ask Adama, because Adama would tell me, like, truthfully from an abundant place what I should be doing. And I gave them a rate, which I don't think is like that astronomical for an event in New York City for 2 hours for like 30 people. I think what I was asking for was very reasonable. And Adama said, if they say no, that just means it's not for you and something better is coming along the way. And that level of trust was such a test, because I think when our minds are in a place of lack, we would accept anything. They're giving you money, like, and we were taught as kids, like when people offer you something, you just take whatever they give you. And it was such a practice of like, you know, non-attachment, detachment from the outcome. Yeah. And so that's why, like, I feel like you're this abundance fairy who who whispers sweet nothings into my ear.
I'm but you know what's interesting though is it's not accepted to do that. So it's very dark feminine energy actually to be like, no, this isn't good enough. I don't want that. That doesn't work for me. You take that back. And then what happens is the corporations with the budget, so what is actually on the higher frequency, will be magnetized to you versus these, I hate to say higher or lower, and I want everyone to know I'm not talking about better or less than, because there's corporations that have big budgets, there's smaller brands that don't. But you are going to attract a higher level of money when you are in that frequency versus attracting people that can offer you less. And that's triggering for a lot of people to hear. And that's why it's actually, when you embody that, it's really embodying the dark feminine energy. Because also, even as women and people who identify as women, we literally were raised to appease other people and people please and be nice. And it's not nice to tell someone like, this isn't enough money. in terms of a societal standard. So it takes a lot of chutzpah to do that.
It takes
And a lot of men don't have a problem doing that.
Mhm. That's actually why I wanted you on, was to talk about the dark feminine. It is your area of expertise. I think it also lends to your Scorpio sun. And so you can like incorporate what you're doing now. You're writing a book and you're doing oracle cards dedicated to Lilith. I don't know where you want to start. Do you want to start talking about Lilith and then the dark feminine? Because Adama was on, I will link her past episode down below where you spoke about Black Moon Lilith. But if you want to give a little bit of a update on that.
I do, sure. So the book is called Black Moon Lilith Rising, How to, oh my gosh, we just came up with a subtitle and it's like, sorry everyone, it's slipping my mind right now, but it's like along the lines of how to work with the alchemy of the dark divine feminine. And then the deck is called Black Moon Lilith Cosmic Alchemy Oracle, and it's a 44 card deck. And they're meant to be complementary with each other. So the book is more of a guide to Lilith, an astrological guide. But then what's different about this book is it's not just the astrology, but I also instruct on how to use it. So to do some of the things that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, to alchemize and utilize that energy in your chart. And there's a workbook as well in there. And then the cards are meant to be part of a daily practice. So when you're in those rage moments, Lilith is about rage. Like it's not just pretty feminine. You can actually pull out the cards and use it as in terms of a meditative shadow practice. You can use it if you're a reader for other people. As a practitioner, you can use it on clients and things like that. But both of them really are about tapping into the dark feminine. And the dark feminine is not really an astrological term. It's one that really describes the deity Lilith versus something that I would apply to astrology, but we really unofficially use it a lot because it not only defines Lilith, but it defines a planet like Pluto. We've got Venus in Scorpio. There's a lot of dark feminine energy in the birth chart, other than Lilith as well. But we do have masculine and feminine in terms of how planets operate and based on their elements as well. But this is really, it's highlighting an energy that has been not only suppressed, but the allegory of her biblical story has been completely twisted to the point where, I mean, I've even seen people calling Black Moon Lilith, this is the succubus energy in your chart. And I think it's so interesting that that's the widely used interpretation, and which is why I wanted to write this book to change that, because Lilith being the first woman, a lot of us believe, and I mean, it's scientifically proven, like the original people on this earth were Black. And Lilith, if anything, was a Black woman. And when we look at how Black women are treated currently and have been throughout history, it's very similar, that it's like this misinterpretation of we're succubus, we're angry, we're deviant, we're Jezebel spirit, we're not to be trusted. So it's really, I just thought it's so interesting that a lot of the interpretations I heard about Lilith are negative, instead of actually looking at the allegory of what the story really means and how that is interpreted in the chart. And it means different things based on how she's aspected in your chart, how it's placed in your chart. And I really wanted to transform what dark feminine energy is for the collective, instead of us being afraid of it or demonizing her. She's a succubus, she's a demon. I wanted people to actually embrace it and know what it actually means. And it's empowerment. Yeah. It's really just, it's self-empowerment. And she was empowered. When you look at the biblical story, she said no to suppression from authority, and she reclaimed her freedom. And we are all born on this planet as free. We are. And so when we look at Lilith's story, she's the archetype that as humans, we should be looking at and living up to when we think about some of the suppression, what's going on in Iran, what's going on here in the United States with Roe v. Wade and the banning of African-American history, banning of dark energy, banning of shadow, banning of truth. So it's all allegory. And that's one thing that my book really clears up is the dark feminine is not something to be feared. It's something to be embraced and to be channeled and used to manifest, actually. Because when you reclaim your sovereignty, you're saying no to shit that isn't aligned and isn't in your highest good.
Because she was Adam's first wife who wouldn't because she wanted to be an equal partnership, not to be submissive to Adam, and said goodbye. And then she was basically sent as a demon and cast away out of the garden. And that's why in biblical stories they say she's a demon, but in reality it was liberated.
Yeah. Well, I think also we have to take a look at these myths. And I mean, I'm not here to bash people's beliefs in their religion, but this is the factual truth. But the stories that she was written into were very steeped with patriarchal beliefs, that if women were not submissive and virginal and nice and, didn't wear makeup, didn't seek the spotlight, didn't reclaim their sovereignty, then they were good women. You won't be demonized. You won't be punished.
Yeah.
But if you go against that, you're a harlot, you're a witch, you're a whore, you're a demon. We're going to turn you into a demon and you're going to die. If you don't want to have children, you're going to die alone. There's all this is like thousands of years of oppression on top of it. So the story was then crafted to basically keep women in subjugation, because they then would go to church, or they'd hear, or wherever they would go, synagogue, or because this is actually based, a lot of this comes from the Hebrew Talmud, her story. It's not even in the New Testament. We have Adam and Eve, but even when we look at Adam and Eve, it's Eve's fault.
Yeah.
So when we look at a lot of the women in in these texts, in ancient theological texts, if they were stepped out of line, you're a whore, you're evil. We can look at Mary Magdalene. This is another one. They literally, I researched that the church actually came out with a statement. It's like the 50s or 60s that no, like we actually haven't found historical proof that she was a whore, so we kind of made that up.
Yeah.
And then there's like rumors that she was actually, in fact, Jesus's wife and right hand of the church. But the reason why that was suppressed is because the male dominance in that belief system. So it's just thousands and thousands of years of oppression, and this is all a stain on the human collective. We're still dealing with the ramifications of that. I even just saw on the news in Afghanistan that they basically mannequins in shops that have female figures. Yeah. They had to cover up and put tinfoil or whatever on the heads of figures of women. So it's really interesting that things that are powerful, people suppress. And so even like makeup has been demonized by these institutions. Let's take a figure like Jezebel, who basically was called a whore and a witch, and like she was using makeup to seduce men. But before that all took place, back in ancient Egypt, makeup was actually part of the spell. Like even men wore it. You couldn't go present yourself to the gods looking, not wearing it. Everyone had a makeup kit in their homes. Yeah, so it's really interesting that a lot of this is demonized and suppressed, but this is dark feminine energy because it's suppressed to the point where it's deemed evil. But really, is it though? That's really the question that my work answers.
It reminds me of, I I just put this on my Instagram about Audre Lorde's work on erotic as power. And she writes, now I haven't memorized it, but she writes like eroticism, which is just the Greek word of eros, which is our pleasure and our creative potential, because the dark feminine is our creative, latent creative power, that's actually what makes us most human. But then they suppress our sexuality, our eroticism, our pleasure, our joy, because those are the things that give us energy. And if we have more energy, we have more to give. And that's what keeps us alive. But like you said, just look at the things that they defund. They defund art, they defund music, they defund sports and makeup and beauty and all these things. And those are the very things that is our magic. So I think that's very it is like questions, like asking yourself questions like, why is sexuality demonized? Why is it taboo? Why are these things like we don't talk about them openly?
Yeah.
I mean, we do, obviously, but like as a society.
Well, we were based on puritanical beliefs. Like, I'll just speak to the United States because, you know, we live here and everything. Who came over on the Mayflower? And these first colonizers that came here because of religious persecution of Christianity. So they came here and instilled, this is the hotbed of our beliefs. And obviously there were enslaved people and the indigenous people that were slaughtered here. So we've also been built on blood. So it's like control and puritanical beliefs is a big part of this country's DNA. So that's I think a big reason why. But then also female power, women's raw sexuality, that's a big part of Lilith, is you're seen as a whore. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because a lot of the men that demonize that will be watching the OnlyFans and be watching pictures. And I researched a lot about Betty Page for the book. Mm-hmm. And I'm drawing from memory, everyone, so don't quote me on this, but she had Black Moon Lilith in Taurus in the second house. Mm-hmm. And she was like the original OnlyFans. Like she sold pictures and they were like making a killing. And there was a rumor that the FBI, who they prosecuted her for doing it, saying this is lewd and you're a whore. They're buying the fucking pictures.
Yeah, crazy.
So it's like they want to basically demonize things that are more powerful than the masculine. And one of the things that women do have is their femininity. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying everybody go out and like do OnlyFans or anything like that. There's different, whatever aligns with you, but raw female sexuality is just seen as evil. Mm-hmm. Even if you think about, it actually just brings to mind, I watched, and this is obviously a fictional story, everyone, but I watched The Handmaid's Tale for the first time kind of recently because I've been a while. It's been a while. I've been trying to stay away from it because I'm like, I don't want to be triggered, but I was like, you know what? Let's get triggered. We need to, you know? And basically the women had like three choices. They had to either be the handmaid getting, you know, basically raped. Sorry, trigger word, everyone. Sorry. Basically getting, you know, sexually assaulted every day to have being forced to have kids. They were either a whore or they had to be the obedient wife that had to be okay with their husbands basically having sex with the handmaids to have kids because they couldn't. So it was like, those are the three roles of women in that show. And it's interesting when you look back at ancient history, when patriarchy really and the church really started to take over, those are the similar roles as well too.
Yeah. Well, Margaret Atwood, the author of that book, said that there was nothing she wrote in that book that didn't already happen or is currently happening in our society.
Yeah.
So it's not a future thing. It's like a historical thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very allegorical story based on what's going on. And we could even look at Lilith and the allegory of that. It's still going on today. I can't tell you how many damn times on like TikTok or YouTube, something pops up about submission. And there's all these men out here now that are like, I need women to submit and I need a feminine woman and this and that. And they don't even know what it means.
Yeah.
And it's also like women, sub dom, all that stuff. Like, do what you want, but if it doesn't align with you and it's not within your nature, because there are women who are masculine, there are men who are more feminine. It's really looking at what aligns with your nature, and you will magnetize to you someone who is complementary to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's just so much talk about submission right now. And a lot of the men, it's like a lot of men who really are talking about this don't even, they're not even aware of what it means. And they're not even aware of just the work, the hundreds of years of work that women have had to go through to have the right to even just walk down the street, which a lot of us can't even do without feeling unsafe because of men. So it's really interesting that we still have these themes playing out today in a, I mean, that story, Lilith is an ancient spirit. Even before the biblical story, it evolved from ancient Mesopotamia. It evolved, she was a wind demon. She was a female wind demon. It evolved from the Epic of Gilgamesh as well. So it's like her spirit has had various evolutions, but she's still that demonized female deity that we all can really learn from.
So I met you like, I don't know, the first time maybe 6 years ago. And that's when I really started to get to know Lilith, as you were like sharing with me. And I forget, so please remind me, you started researching Lilith because of your own chart, and you noticed like you had Lilith on your ascendant, and right? Your ascendant?
Yeah, so I have Lilith in the first house.
Mhm.
And basically, so what triggered me really was it was introduced to me in an astrology course, which I was taking to take the tests and all that stuff for certification. And I was like, wow, this is like really, this is a really interesting point here that I'm seeing. And there really wasn't still much shared in the class. So I went home and started doing my research, and just everything that came up was just so, if not patriarchal, very Eurocentric. And I was just very confused, like, why is this like this? Like, this is very, yeah, this is through like one lens. And I'm just like looking at my chart and like just visions of, I mentioned I grew up with a single mother. I grew up, I'm a Black woman in America. And not only that, I grew up with like literal ferocious tiger mommies around me, and women who literally said no and did what they needed to do to survive. And I was like, succubus energy, like demon. I was like, this isn't working for me. I was like, I think this is my work. Because then I also just, I just, when you comes over you, like you're just like, this is, because I was just gonna be like Adama Sesay's astrology or whatever, I was gonna just brand it myself. But I realized this isn't helping anyone. And I was like, this is through one lens.
Yeah.
This is through a different lens. And I'm just tired. Like, it's like how Jesus is painted white, and a lot of these biblical figures are Eurocentric. I'm like, I'm tired of this shit.
I love
And I decided to change it.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that, because even when we met up in the city like a month ago, and you reminded me that as below, so above as well. Like, we make meaning out of the stars and celestial bodies based on our own biases and our own perspectives. So if we're only learning from like Eurocentric white men and people, then they're going to interpret things like Black Moon Lilith, in their own pantheon of knowledge, right? Like their own deities who are, let's be honest, like white, like from Greek and Roman mythology. So I'm expanding my level of like awareness on all the different deities that can be represented by these celestial bodies that are beyond just like Greco-Roman. And I was just curious as to like, and thank you for sharing your story, like how you went from learning it from maybe a more traditional astrologer to then being like, no, Lilith is a fierce Black woman. Deity.
Yeah. So a lot of it is my own interpretation. So, and then I look at actual people's charts. So I mean, now it's like thousands of charts, client charts. A lot of my study is included in the book around it. And then also celebrities as well, or notable people, or people whose story that we know publicly, taking a look at their chart, taking a look at Black Moon Lilith there. What happened? Why? What was the energy behind it? Why? What was the purpose? A lot of people don't realize what a sad upbringing Betty Page had, or Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe has Black Moon Lilith, literally conjunct her ascendant, and on the surface is beautiful bombshell, feminine power, but she had a very, very sad life. A lot of sad life and trauma from men, from the masculine. So I'm like, how is Lilith energy a succubus when the trauma is coming, when there's there's shit coming from the external that's creating that. So it's like, even though like I teach a lot of internal work and our internal determines our external, we live in a society where we have to deal with other people's consciousness. So Black Moon Lilith can also inform how you handle the external, the trauma that's coming in, and alchemize the trauma you've gone through. So a big part of Black Moon Lilith is trauma, power struggles. Sexual trauma can be a big part of it, depending on the placement. Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio is a general placement that can indicate some of that. But I took a look at what was really going on, and then it's through my lens as a Black woman, because it's like, you can't have my lens if you haven't gone through the shit I go through. Like I literally have my partner is white, and he's like, you have opened my eyes to so much things that I know these things exist, but the level of nuance that you've pointed out that I've just not been able to see, it's insane how racism and oppression permeates so deeply in our society. I can't even go to the store without some shit going on. Microaggression, even if it's like a small thing. And most of the time I'm alchemizing that pain. And so that's what I offer when it comes to interpretation of Lilith. And she's the original demonized dark feminine. So it's like, well, doesn't it make sense for somebody who has had that lens to like actually do that interpretation? Because I've heard so many different interpretations of Lilith, and a lot of it doesn't talk about people will be like, oh, she's a feminist placement, it's where you're feminist, and it's like, there's more to it than that. There's a little more to it than that. We could even think of maybe even Chiron, but Chiron is it's still different than Lilith. It's a little more it is a little more depth levels.
Mythology. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that even the fact that people don't talk about Lilith in your chart says it all. Like these asteroids that are mostly feminine, quote unquote, are not even introduced into like traditional astrology, because why would they? They're women. They're asteroids. They don't matter, which I find very interesting. So dark feminine energy, you gave us some like key words about what that means. One of which you said, no, taking back your power. So how do you begin to work with that energy? Because it seems like just from knowing you had to do a lot of shadow work and clearing in order for you to get to this place where you were comfortable with your dark feminine energy. And then it's alchemizing that to then say no to the things that aren't aligned to you and stand up for yourself.
Yeah, a lot of it's those two things, but kind of like what I was saying about dealing with microaggressions, or like say like racism. Literally in those moments, having instead of absorbing it and being like, yeah, I am worthless. Yeah, I'm nothing. Instead of, because that's what happens to a lot, especially Black people, is we'll take on that belief and believe like, oh yeah, you know, like I can't tell you how many, and I'm going to say something very controversial, and people, if you want to come for me, that's fine. I don't care. A lot of people have approached me about doing, especially this month, Black history panels, or why there aren't enough Black people in astrology and all of this stuff. And I'm like, we have to believe we're worth enough.
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit up here and explain why there are not enough Black people. I'm fucking here and I'm worth enough. And I really don't care what anyone else has to say about it. And I'm not going to spin in a spin cycle of a low self-worth and need to prove myself. You like it or you don't. So it's really basically standing up for your worth and not believing the projections of other people that it's like putting me in like a box. Like I can't tell you like how many like, like I recently had a PR person pitch me for business, which I didn't go with this person, but one of the big ideas was like, oh, well, you're a Black astrologer, so we should pitch you to a lot of, these lists, like top astrologers to follow. I was like, I've been on those lists before. I'm more than just a Black person.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's part of my lens. It's part of what I do, but I'm astrologer.
Yeah.
And I'm here.
I'm
And
a
that's
person.
it. I'm not sitting here talking about like, I'm not going to prove or need to be on a list. These lists are ridiculous. We should just be included altogether.
Yeah.
And I am equal. I am enough. And I don't need to prove to anyone. I don't need to be included on shit and then not even seen the rest of the fucking year. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? Do you know how it's like you don't have any other ideas? That I don't have anything else to offer? Because what's interesting is even though I say this through the dark divine feminine in my tagline, it's because it's through my lens, but it's for everyone. I had a white client last night who's booked with me many, many times. I help tons of people. I have men as clients. I recently had a man who was going through challenging relationship with his wife who booked because he's like, I need a real feminine perspective. I'm like, what these challenges I'm having with the women in my life, I need help. So it's like someone like Oprah. She broke that mold of like, I'm a Black media person. Oprah's Oprah. No one looks at Oprah as like, oh, well, she's a Black media person. We got to include her on this list. She's just her. And that's what it is. But she had to break out of that mindset that the only thing she had to offer is that she's Black.
Yeah.
So it's like Lilith energy is for the collective, but she's seen as a model of rebellion and freedom. And a lot of Black people, especially in the United States, have had to free themselves and have had to fight against oppression and really fight back and constantly facing projections from other people. And it doesn't matter where in the world you go, it's constant. So my rant aside, but it's not even like about like people do what you want, like if you want to be on lists and things like that. But for me, that's how I've transformed that. I'm like, I'm not just Black. Like what I have to offer is I'm a spiritual fucking being. And my path here is through this vessel of, yeah, I'm Black, but you can learn a lot from my perspective as just a person.
But also, when they say there's like no Black astrologers, there are. You're just not decentering yourself. Like,
I'm like rolling my eyes for everyone that's listening.
Are.
Yeah, it's like decenter yourself.
Yeah.
Like I was just, and like a lot of them don't even ask. Like I was just included on a couple of them. I got tagged. I'm like, oh, here we go with Black History Month. I hear crickets the rest of the year. And then this month you're tagging me so you can look good. And it's like, it looks very performative. It's giving performative.
So I was at a dinner for my cousin's birthday, and I met his friend for the first time, who was a white British man. He's queer, but like still like a white British man. And if he's listening to this, hi. But he was saying that he wanted to write a book about like social activism beyond just the Black square, and that he wanted to bring something new to the table. And I was like, you know that there are like hundreds of thousands of millions of Black, Indigenous scholars who have already written about this topic, that this information is out there already. It's just you need to decenter yourself and read their work first, because as Pedagogy of the Oppressed says, that book by, I forget the name of the author, the oppressor cannot be the leader. It just like, it has to be reimagined by people of the global majority. It cannot be through a lens of centering, of individualism, of like the white lens. And I think it was like, I think because he was my cousin's friend, he didn't like say anything like to be combative. But I don't know if white folks truly know what it is to live in a world that's not based around them.
It triggers them when there's moments and they're not centered, which we can count the ways that we've seen,
Yeah.
like implosion. I mean, we can even take like on TikTok, the Black Girl Follow train that was banned. And basically, this is another thing that we have to, and I might trigger some Black folks here, but whatever. We have to get out of that. I'm not saying the Black Girl Follow train is bad. I think it's fantastic. And I think that that's a great way to get more presence for Black creators on that app. But we also have to take a look at who are you supporting yourself? Because there's so many times that a lot of us, like, you'll see rappers, they get rich, they get famous, and they're wearing Gucci, they're wearing Fendi. When was the last time you bought from a Black designer? When was the last time you showed up to a Black Fashion Week show and sat in the front? Mm-hmm. Are you playing into the oppressor, or are you actually mindfully taking a look at the marketplace and supporting other people? Mm-hmm. So, but ran aside with that, but like the Black Girl Follow train, a lot of white people got triggered, white women most specifically, that they're like, this is racist. How would you like if we had the white follow train? This and that.
You already do.
But that's the thing, is it's like the minute that you're not centered, the minute you're not the center of the universe, you're triggered. And instead of spiritually taking a look at, why am I upset that I'm not the center, and these women have been oppressed for so long, and they're just uniting and giving each other praise and more exposure. Why am I triggered? But instead, it's like, let's just shut it down. It's like the burning of the Black neighborhood Tulsa.
Yeah.
It's just like people get triggered when you unite and you stand up for yourself. But I just think that just taking a look at who are you supporting as a person of color? What brands are you buying? Because we live in, even though it sucks, we do live in a capitalist society that's run by finances. And a lot of the time people don't realize you vote for the things that you want to exist with your money. So if you're not supporting people that look like you, then there's not going to be anyone. Mm-hmm. Oprah got famous not because of just Black people. Mm-hmm. So it's like, think about that. I think that's just something to chew on. Mm-hmm. I know I go out of my way all the time. Even if I'm in a department store, they'll have a Black owned section, and I will walk over and take a look at what I like and see it. I've supported so many different practitioners in the space, and I know there's tons of Black astrologers, like you said, they're just not in the mainstream and in the magazines and seen and in the app store, but they're there. Yeah. And they need your support, or else we're going to go and sit and have these fucking panels and talk about why there aren't any. And the real reason is there's no one supporting that. So it's like y'all don't want me to show up to the panel, because I'll let y'all know exactly what it is.
So I asked that question because because you're a spiritual practitioner too, like, do you think the real reason why people are afraid of the dark feminine or try to suppress it is because it's like, I just can't help but see the symbolism, like whiteness, not just white people, but whiteness prefers like plain, vanilla, safe, quiet, docile, submissive, the light feminine, if you will, like the mother, the virgin, but they don't want, or they're afraid of the shadow, the dark, the chaos, the sexual. Do you think that's like embedded in our consciousness?
Yes, it's from the thousands of years of patriarchal oppression, indoctrination into it. Even now, it's like there's just so much in the news about women, either the low birth rate or women just opting out of this role that we're supposed to play of being birthing mules and having kids. A lot of women are like, I don't want to do that. I want to focus on my career. I want to just have a partner and travel and do what I want to do. Yeah, okay. But a lot of people have a problem with it. Like they're like triggered because women are finally breaking out of the construct of what society wants. So that's very dark feminine to really own what you want, not what your family wants or what society wants. What do you want? What aligns with you? And a lot of the older generations of women, I can't tell you how many times I've literally got on the phone with my grandma, who's like very old, and from Freetown, Sierra Leone, and she's like, when are you having kids? When do you have, like, first words out of her fucking mouth? And I'm just like, I just alchemize it. I'm like, and I'm like, she doesn't know. She's from an old consciousness.
Yeah.
So it's like embedded, it's ingrained to have this role and to play this role in society. And so, I mean, I think this is kind of going along with Pluto moving into Aquarius, a lot of women and people waking up into their power. This is why it's so sad what's going on in Iran, but this is unheard of. Like, the women are literally, and men are getting executed for speaking out against straight up patriarchal violence and oppression. And it's just only going to continue and until we're really free. And it also harms the opposite polarity, men, and the masculine as well too. It's harming everybody.
When you said the dark feminine says no, it reminded me of Aries energy, because I'm an Aries sun and the North Node moving into Aries. I feel like Aries is a hard no. It's like, I'm only doing what I want to do.
Aries is like, yeah, no, we're doing
No,
me.
I'm only doing me.
I'm doing me. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got the South Node in Libra. So it's like, as collectively, we all need to release that codependency and some of the shadow aspects. South Node is malefic. We got to release the shadow aspects of Libra. If you got Libra placements, I have Mars.
What do I?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, we talked about this. We talked about this. Yeah.
So here we go. And basically, this is going to be, we have the eclipses coming up this year, the nodes changing in July, an 18-month period where it's time to choose yourself. And I think also I don't also want people to think that like the light feminine or some of these lighter aspects of femininity are bad. Because also another thing about the South Node, it's not also about getting rid of it. It's about integrating the things that are powerful about it and channeling that into that North Node. But I don't think that the light aspects of femininity, like, let's even just take like, I would consider, and it depends on where it's placed, of course, like Venus and Scorpio, that's more of the dark feminine, but let's take Venus and Libra. That's a lighter side to femininity. And I don't think that all parts of that are bad, but there are shadow aspects to it. And even just like the dark feminine, there are shadow aspects to that as well. So low self-worth. It's basically like counteracting the more empowering side of Lilith, self-destruction. I mean, you can look at a story like Marilyn Monroe. She's a very Lilith archetype. Yeah, we all know. there's the Netflix special on her right now, and it was a very she allowed the demons and the trauma that she experienced to self-destruct. So that is another big part of it as well. So it's you, with every dark there's the light. And so I think in life it's about balancing both energies, because there's some of the light feminine, like I love to play with makeup. I love to cook. Like, I love to do, I do, like, generally I'm very cooperative. I like will let my partner lead, and he's an Aries actually. So it's like in his innate energy to lead. But if I wasn't down with that, that wouldn't work. So, but then there's aspects of my dark femininity that I've embraced and that also empower me as well too. So it's really balancing those energies in your life. I think that's important.
That's so beautifully said. I also have Lilith on my ascendant, so I'm like really meditating on what you said about Marilyn Monroe.
Don't self-destruct. I'm kidding. And it depends on your chart. Like it's wild, some of her story. It's like she was an orphan. I think her mom, like, she did, I don't even think she knows the father. Mother wasn't around, and then was adopted, and then got married at 16, was discovered she was working in like a factory, and then started doing pinup girl stuff, and then slowly made her way to the silver screen. But it's so interesting that even today, she didn't have any descendants. She didn't have an estate. And literal men own her image and
Yeah.
own her story and just keep putting it out, putting it out, putting it out. And they make so much money from selling her merch. Like you can't walk into a souvenir store in New York City without seeing Marilyn Monroe somewhere. And so that's how powerful that dark feminine actually is. They're still making money off of it.
There's a story of that movie Blonde that was played by Ana de Armas, and how that was like a fan fiction story, and how they painted her as this very like desperate, sad, very, very sad story. And the actress who played her tells stories of how Marilyn was like haunting them, that her spirit was there. And I was like, it's because you won't let her spirit rest. You won't let her go. And you know, Kim Kardashian, when she wore her dress and then Ripley's Believe It or Not gave her a lock of her hair, I'm like, that's fucking magic. What are you doing? I was like, oh no, no,
well,
no.
I actually did a TikTok on that. I'm like, we see how things are going right now. So
yeah. That's right.
I mean, like,
that's some dark magic. Don't
like,
do it. Don't do it, girl.
Don't do it. But I mean, I'm giving Betty Page and Marilyn examples, but it's like Lilith energy comes in so many forms. And let's take a look at Rosa Parks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's take a look at Angela Davis. These are our other Lilith archetypes. And that's the other side to Lilith, is standing up for yourself. Literally, Rosa was like, no, bitch, like, I'm not getting up for your ass. I'm equal to you. Okay, you want to send me to jail? Cool. Want to demonize me? Like back then, like now we're all like, oh, hero, all this stuff now, but she was a villain to most in the country. So, but it's like it took time for that new precedence to set in. It took that revolutionary act for things to change, for things to trigger change. So Lilith energy brings transformation to the collective through pain, through demonization, to being put into jail. Some even say Marilyn Monroe was murdered. Like she didn't even, it wasn't, they don't even know what really happened. Like they say it was a suicide, but she was probably murdered. So it's not light energy. It's not just about the light aspects of femininity. But she's also not, I really want to clear that up. Like, yes, demon and demonization is a big part of it, but we have to remember a lot of these myths are allegories, people. So calling Lilith a succubus is like, I think it's just ridiculous. Like, I just heard it so many fucking times, and I'm just like, I feel like Lilith, like her energy is like channels through me with that, and it's just like, no, that's not it. That's not it.
Do you have special ways of, I mean, your whole book and your whole mission in life is at like a big offering and devotion to Lilith, but do you ever like, do you have special things that you offer her?
I do, but I can't talk about my I keep that
You're such a
I keep that on the low, my witchy stuff, because I'm more, I do publicly my astrology, and I've actually over the past year and a half have integrated cards and tarot into my practice publicly, but I don't share my witchy stuff.
That's okay. That's okay. Everybody can.
But I do. I really, and even I can share this, but even before even anything I do, I give thanks silently. I'll do my own, I'll talk and talk to myself about it, talk to Lilith, and really set that intention.
It's beautiful. So if you want to know about your Lilith, you can book a reading with Adama. You're still seeing clients, right?
I am. My calendar currently, because now that the book and deck are in a great place this year, I am taking clients and my calendar's open. So
Your calendar's open.
sure.
Your book comes out in the fall.
Yes.
To be determined. And yeah, work with your divine feminine, dark feminine energy and learn more from Adama. Was there anything else you wanted to share before we close?
Yeah, you guys can find me on lilithastrology.com and there sign up for email because I have a free guide to Black Moon Lilith when you sign up. And that's where I'll be announcing the book and pre-sale and like all that fun stuff. So join me there.
Great. Thanks for being on again. What a lovely conversation.
Hey, thanks for having me.